Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Usman Parang Saparita Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna and welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for your association as we continue Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 12, verses 30 to 36, the birth of Emperor Parikshit. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sarva Shastra Puyusha Sarva Vaireka Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Triprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalidwando Didaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you enriched with jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you grand spiritual vision of the to all the people of the world, O light breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshasha Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance by reading you on attains transcendental bliss. For your syllables rain pure love of God upon the reader. You always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madhekabandhu, Matsangim, Madguru, Man Mahadana, Man Nishtarakam, Bhagya, Madananda, Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. Sadhu sadhu tadahi natini chochataraka hannamuncha kada chinmam premna kritkatyo spura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O giver of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplift to the very fallen, please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest Mahatma Truth, accompanied by your love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yatonvayaditarata Sharte Swabhigna Swarat Tene Brahma Hidaya Adi Kavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yathavinimayo Yatrati Sargom Risha Damna Svena Sadani Rasta Kuakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destructions of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature appear effectual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is absolute truth. Vainalpaisha Sabya Kalavasmin Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagya Padrata, O learned one in this age of Kali, many but short lives, that quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayan Namaskritya Narachevam Narotamam Devim Saraswati Vyasa Jayam Mudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance to the personality of God in Narayan. Under Narayan, we should the supremest human being, and the Mother Saraswati, the goddess, learning, and under Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Sarvai sa parodharmo yato bhaktira dokshaja ahitika pratyata yatma suprasiddhati. The supreme occupation, dharma for all humanity, is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janatya Jana Yatyosha Vairagyam, Jnanam Chayat Ahitukam, by rendering devotional service under the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. One immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Vadanti tattato vidas tattvam yat gnanam advayam prameti paramat meti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth called as non-dual substance, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Shrushrodha Saradanasya Vasudeva Katharchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shranvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Retantostoya Badrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and a benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nasta Prayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. By regular attendance on the classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is completely destroyed, and loving service under the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We continue Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Brahmacharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna and welcome back. Canto 1, Chapter 12, verses 20 to 29 that we recapped and covered last week. Are there any points that you remember from last week's session, feedback that you want to give us in terms of some points that you found interesting, amazing, and inspiring so that we can recap before we continue with today's verses? Please type in the chat. Okay, Sharina, thank you very much. Please accept my humble obeisances and appreciation. I liked hearing about the qualifications of Maharaj Parikshit, especially his qualifications being similar to a lion, but also that he could be compassionate and caring for his subjects. It reminds me of Srila Prabhupada how fierce Srila Prabhupada could be in preaching, but at the same time how affectionate he was towards everyone. Yes. And in these sections that we are covering, we are hearing about the qualities and the contribution of Maharaj Parikshit. Two aspects that describe somebody's a personality, their qualities and their contribution. So we are hearing the Brahmanas are foretelling the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit, and also they are foretelling his contribution. What is he going to do? And we heard the quality last week, specifically that he was like a lion and a lamb. Contradictory qualities, but both these two qualities amplified his glory, because he's able, as a king, he's able to defeat, as Prabhupada called, upstarts or thieves, culprits, rascals, those who deviate from the laws of Krishna consciousness that Maharaj Parikshit had set. So for those people, Maharaj Parikshit was like a lion. He would not tolerate and he would attack and subdue them. But at the same time, for those who are obedient, he was like a lamb in relation to them. He supported them. It's described he was like a reservoir. Everybody or resort. Everybody came to take shelter of him. So as a king, he gave shelter, he gave protection, he provided all the necessities. So a wonderful personality with these two traits. And Prabhupada said a devotee also, when preaching, should be like a lion. And Prabhupada was no doubt like a lion, very, very bold. And then as at home with devotees in the temple, with guests speaking, Prabhupada was very cordial, very kind, very humorous at times. So this was very wonderful. And because the pure devotee is himself, he is completely pure at heart. There's no hidden agenda. So it's not like you have to figure out what the person, what is he saying? Let me interpret what he's saying. He made that statement. Maybe there's something behind that statement. No, the pure devotee is a straight book. The pure devotee is honest. So he tells it as it is, but because there is no animosity, there's no jealousy, there's no envy, that purity is also felt through his exchanges. Shyamananda Prabhu says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the weekly nectar. In those last few purports, Srila Prabhupada gives us information on many different personalities which we would otherwise not know about. How is it that Srila Prabhupada knows so much of this information by study, revelation, etc.? So even sometimes I get astounded and shocked. Like if you look at Srila Prabhupada, even Srila Prabhupada's lectures, Srila Prabhupada's writings, he'll speak and then he'll quote from scripture, referencing. This was Prabhupada's amazing ability to present Krishna consciousness in an authoritative way. Now, no doubt, Prabhupada studied. Prabhupada spent many years studying and learning, but also by the purity, by Krishna consciousness, the Dami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Krishna also inspires, right? Even remembering and presenting what you know is also revelation. It's also Krishna's mercy for, Krishna's mercy coming in that form. So so Prabhupada, and we find many great souls in Krishna consciousness. They spend their time, they study, and Krishna reciprocates. They're able to memorize, and on a perfect level, then Ridya Gyan Girde Prakashito. The knowledge is manifested in the heart. So that's at a very, very advanced level, on the topmost level. But otherwise, yes, study. All the information that Prabhupada received, he had received from his poetry master, from the previous acharyas. Prabhupada would travel with the commentaries of the acharyas, and the acharyas have given all this in their commentaries. So Prabhupada was able to assimilate all the commentaries, digest the commentaries, and then present it to us. So we are fortunate to receive it like that. It's a storehouse. So even the Bhagavatam, the verses of the Bhagavatam is described to be the essence of all that we need to know is the Bhagavatam. So if we go through Srimad Bhagavatam, we practically are exposing ourselves to the cream and the essence of all that we need to learn in creation, in existence for eternity. Then Srila Prabhupada's purports, they clarify and expand those points and understanding. And Prabhupada would then give his own realizations and his own purports. So yes, astounding and wonderful. That is why people love to be with Srila Prabhupada. He was, or even, Prabhupada gives the example of his own Guru Maharaj, walking encyclopedia. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was in walking encyclopedia. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's English language was like super advanced. So you can imagine now someone with such a powerful command of the English language, even the British were scared to approach him. And then he practically could speak about any subject. So these are very, very special souls, no doubt. Mother Lash, Hare Krishna, we are so fortunate. The regular principles of ISKCON immediately puts a devotee above the influence of Kali. Yes. All glories to Srila Prabhupada giving us devotees this wonderful platform for us to make spiritual advancement. Very true. Srila Prabhupada said that if you practice Krishna consciousness, the four regular principles, you are sinless. You're on the platform of sinlessness. And last week we heard how these four principles, four regular principles that we follow, they are counteracting the four sinful limbs of Kali Yuga, the four pillars of Kali Yuga, of sinful life, but definitely of Kali Yuga. So Krishna consciousness, as soon as somebody comes to the beginning of Krishna consciousness, following the basic four regular principles, they're basically rising above the influence of Kali. So very, very advanced platform, just to follow the four regular principles. What to talk about then chanting and then taking one's Krishna consciousness to the next level. Thank you very much for everyone's feedback. Let us proceed. So we are going to complete 30 to 36, Parikshit's growth and Yudhishthira's performance of the Yajna. 30. Sa eshaloke vikyata Parikshit iti yat prabhu purvam drishtam anudhyayan pariksheta nareshviha. So his son could become his son would become famous in the world as Parikshit, examiner, because he would come to examine all human beings in his search after that personality whom he saw before his birth. Thus, he would come to constantly contemplate him. So here, the sages are describing Parikshit and why he actually got that name and the benefit of that. So Prabhupada in the purport starts by saying, Maharaj Parikshit, fortunate as he was, got the impression of the Lord even in the womb of his mother. And thus, his contemplation on the Lord was constantly with him. So how was that contemplation of the Lord always with him? Prabhupada describes. Once the impression of transcendental form of the Lord is fixed in one's mind, one can never forget him in any circumstance. Child Parikshit, after coming out of the womb, was in the habit of examining everyone to see whether he was the same personality whom he first saw in the womb. But no one could be equal to or more attractive than the Lord, and therefore he never accepted anyone. But the Lord was constantly with him by such examination. And thus, Parikshit Maharaj was always engaged in devotional service of the Lord by remembrance. So Maharaj Parikshit was fortunate that he saw the Lord in the womb. And no doubt, seeing the Lord is no ordinary activity. Krishna is the most beautiful. So the child saw this most beautiful personality. That impression, and that was the first impression that he received right in the womb, before even coming out. That got ingrained, samskar, impression. That's what we call in Sanskrit, samskars, impression, got ingrained in his consciousness. And because of that samskar, especially when children are small, whatever they see, touch, feel, smell, experience creates deep impressions in their consciousness. Children's consciousness is very, very pliable in their early stages, from birth to about 5 to 10 years old. So they very conducive to be groomed, right, to create the proper impression. So Maharaj Parikshit's impression of the Supreme Lord was there. As soon as he came out, he naturally, because of that impression comes through, and he wants to see that person again and again and again. So this is how much Parikshit, because he was trying to find that person which he had impression of, even though he couldn't find that person, was Krishna, because he was examining everyone. But because he was thinking, oh, is this the person I saw, Krishna? He doesn't know the name, but is this the person I saw? He's remembering Krishna. So this is how much Parikshit was becoming more and more a pure devotee simply by remembering Krishna indirectly because of that impression. So Prabhupada is going to now share with us his own life and example of why this is important. For bringing and raising children, it's important that we create the proper samskaras and the proper habits. Knowledge is not the criteria for raising children. It's not about educating children. Children need to get the proper habits and proper impressions, proper samskars. When they have the proper habits, proper culture, proper impressions, then as they grow up into youth, then they get educated, and that education can be founded on proper habits, culture, and impressions to then drive them forward. Okay? If you simply educate children without the proper value system or habits or proper impressions, then the knowledge that they receive will not do that. So therefore, in the early part of children's life, how parents bring them up is very, very important. So Prabhupada now talks about that principle. Srila Jiva Goswami remarks in this connection that every child, if given an impression of the Lord from his very childhood, certainly becomes a great devotee of the Lord, like Maharaj Parikshit. One may not be as fortunate as Maharaj Parikshit to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother, but even if he's not so fortunate, he can be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. So the responsibility is not on the child. The responsibility is on the parents, because children are dependent. So it is the parents' responsibility to groom the child or to pave the child's future to be Krishna conscious. There's a practical example in my personal life in this connection. My father was a pure devotee of the Lord. And when I was only 4 or 5 years old, my father gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister, and I used to imitate the performance of the neighboring temple of Radha Govinda. By constantly visiting this neighboring temple and copying the ceremonies in connection with my own deities of play, I developed a natural affinity for the Lord. My father used to observe all the ceremonies befitting my position. Later on, these activities were suspended due to my association in schools and colleges, and I became completely out of practice. But in my youthful days, when I met my spiritual master, Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, again, I revived my old habits, right? My old habits. So here Prabhupada is using that word, habit. So the habit that was created in his childhood never left him. Yes, he got distracted because of college, etc. But the habit was there. And that habit revived when the circumstance was ideal for it. And the same playful deities became my worshipful deities in proper regulation. This was followed up until I left the family connection, and I'm pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. So now here Prabhupada is using the word impressions. So these are the two aspects, habits and impressions, that we need to help children create in their life. Maharaj Prahlad also advised that such impressions of a godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity of human form of life, which is very valuable, although it is temporary like others. So every child's mind is innocent. It is our duty to mold their mind into Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada, he saw his parents, he saw his father worshipping. He went to the neighboring temple. Naturally, he was curious and he wanted to do the same thing. Children, they learn by following their parents. They are very good imitators of parents. So children really don't learn by education. They really learn by imitation, imitating. They imitate you. If the parents bow down, the children want to bow down. It's just a natural tendency that children have. They'll do what their parents do. So Srila Prabhupada saw his parents worshipping, his father worshipping. So he also wanted to do that. Naturally, he wanted to worship the big deities, the installed deities, right? Because his father is doing that, so I also want to do that. And his father said, no, we get you a nice small deity. So then his parents his father, Guru Mohandas, gave Srila Prabhupada rather Govinda deities, small deities, to then play. And it's ascribed that Srila Prabhupada would do everything in relation to the deity. So everything that Prabhupada ate, he would first go and offer it to his deities as a small child. And he wouldn't offer it like how we offer formally with regulation, ringing the bell, chanting mantras. No, he's a child. But because he sees father taking the boga and offering, he also takes the boga and offer and then rings the bell. He doesn't know what the father is chanting. It doesn't matter. He's ringing the bell. The habit is being cultivated. He baits the deities, etc. And as Srila Prabhupada grew up and went to college, he could not then maintain that regulation. So then he put deities to rest in a box. And Prabhupada himself says later on, he had a dream that the deities are crying. Why are you keeping us locked in a box? So he felt very bad. So then he woke them up again and started worshiping. But now as an adult, now it's not just childish habits of worshiping. Now it becomes a regulation, spiritual regulation, worshiping regulation, proper regulation in deity worship. So this is how the upbringing of children is very, very important. Now, the key here is also important to note that it's not force. See, Srila Prabhupada was never forced to worship his deities. He was inspired to worship the deities. Because if you force children, then that becomes a repellent, that becomes a distraction in their consciousness, that becomes a negative aspect in their consciousness. So when they grow up, they'll be rebellious. So it's not about forcing habit, it's about inspiring proper habits. Therefore, Prabhupada said that raising children has to be done through Krishna Krida, means playful, raising children in the proper habits through play. Krishna, he would have 64 different categories of games that Krishna would play with his coward friends. And devotee parents need to raise their children through those 64 different games that Krishna was playing. all the category of games that the Lord was playing in his childhood, all those different categories of games, they all are ideal and perfect to mold every child and stimulate the children's senses, whether it's emotive or whether it's emotion, whether it's intellectual, to mold them in every way. This is the beauty of Krishna's childhood pastimes. And we have one devotee friend who's compiled a book on Krishna Krida to help parents, cultivate parents in terms of how to raise children through playing. A very interesting way, because children love to play. That's what they do, and they love that, eating, playing, and that's children's life. So introducing Krishna's pastimes and giving them that habits through that inspiration, that is ideal, and this will always be with them forever. 31. Saraja putro vavride ashu shukla ivodupa apuryamana pitribi kashtabir ivason baham. As the moon in its waxing fortnight develops day after day, so the royal prince Parikshit very soon developed luxuriantly under the care and full facilities of his guardian grandfathers. So he grew up very, very nicely, naturally again under the proper care and attention of his guardians. Children cannot be brought up in isolation. It's not like you can bring up children in your house. No, children do not grow or do not flourish in a home. Children flourish in a village, in a community. And that is why it is important to have a Krishna conscious community where children are exposed to a community, and that community facilitates and aids the upbringing of children. So Parikshit had that facility, right, of, in this case, explaining his guardian grandfathers. He had that facility, he was fortunate. Yakshamano somedenam gnati droha jihasaya raja labda dano dadyo nan yatra karadandayo. Just at this time, King Yudhishthira was considering performing a horse sacrifice to get freed from sins incurred from fighting with kinsmen. But he became anxious to get some wealth, for there was no surplus funds outside of fines and tax collection. So now the Brahmanas have described the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit. They have left, and now we are learning, coming to the end of this chapter, where we hear Yudhishthira Maharaj now wanted to perform a sacrifice, but he required wealth. And Prabhupada in the purport describes, as the Brahmanas and Vipras had a right to be subsidized by the state executive head had the right to collect taxes and fines from citizens. After the Battle of Kurukshetra, the state treasury was exhausted, and therefore there was no surplus fund except the fund from tax collection and fines. Such funds were sufficient only for the state budget, and having no excess funds, the king was anxious to get more wealth in some other way in order to perform the horse sacrifice. Maharaj Yudhishthira wanted to perform this sacrifice under the instruction of Bhishmadev. So we heard how even taxation in the Vedic system was, was administered but administered also in the mode of goodness, meaning that if you had, let's say, if I have a farm and I produce grains, then I'll be taxed. If I make a profitable harvest, then I get taxed proportionately. Let's say that year I did not make any harvest, then the king would not tax you. Right? So it was very fair. There was no exploitation. It wasn't like excessive taxing like in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga, one of the qualities in the 12th canto, it is described in the 12th canto, one of the qualities of Kali Yuga, that in Kali Yuga, people will be taxed to death. So in the death certificate, they will write taxed due to a death due to tax. Because you got so stressed. Oh, I got so many bills. So, and it's interesting if you look at, if you just do an analysis of the tax laws, side note, you will find that the government taxes you on the money that you get, and then when you buy something with the money that you already taxed, they tax you VAT on that product, which means they tax you on that. Then if you take the money that you already taxed and you invest that, then they tax you on that, capital gains tax. So you'll see, as Kali Yuga progresses, they will tax you for everything. Eventually you'll be taxed to breathe air, tax for water, tax for all these different areas. I remember when we were in Midrand and we want to do, there's a river that goes through the property, and we wanted to look at using the water. And one of the neighbors told us, well, before you use the water from this river, you have to get permission. What permission? So, no, because you get taxed. The government will tax you. You can't just use that water. So for everything, this is Kali Yuga. But this was not the Vedic system. The Vedic system was very fair. And also the tax that was collected in the Vedic system was not going into the pockets of the leaders. They would take that tax and they would use that for the benefit of the citizens. So in this way, the citizens felt cared for, protected, that the money is coming back anyway, but it's coming back collectively and therefore with greater impact. Because of the Battle of Kurukshetra, all the treasury was exhausted, because this is what war does. War depletes the resources that one has. And this is the nature of war. So Maharaj Yudhishthira, on the instruction of Bhishma Dev to have a horse sacrifice, he was concerned, how can I get funds? So Yudhishthira Maharaj is wondering what to do. And he's not alone. Text 33. Tad abhipetram alakshya brataro achyuta chodita danam prahinam ahar ajaru udicham dishipushrisha. Understanding the hearty wishes of the king, his brothers, as advised by the infallible Lord Krishna, collected sufficient riches from the north, left by King Maruta. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was never alone. The Pandavas was never alone. Why? They were with Krishna. They are devotees of Krishna. And as devotees of Krishna, Krishna reciprocates. Therefore, here in this verse, Krishna's name is Achyuta, infallible. So Prabhupada describes how Krishna directed the Pandavas to get wealth. And that's a wonderful lesson, that as devotees, we are never alone. It is not that devotees will not go through anxiety. Last week we heard that the goal is not to remove anxiety. The goal is not to go away from anxiety. But the goal is to spiritualize anxiety, Prabhupada says in the purports. So we want to spiritualize anxiety. Maharaj Yudhishthira was Dharmaraj. He was Krishna conscious, like Maharaj Parikshit, completely Krishna conscious, which means their life and their duty is Krishna conscious. So in performing their duty in a Krishna conscious way, whatever anxiety transpires is not material, it is spiritual. Consider Srila Prabhupada. It is not that Srila Prabhupada never went through anxieties. Srila Prabhupada went through countless of anxieties. And it's not that Krishna helped Srila Prabhupada in every one of the anxieties. No. But no matter whether Krishna assisted Srila Prabhupada in overcoming an anxiety or not, Prabhupada's perspective and how Prabhupada handled the anxieties was important. Right? It was in a Krishna conscious way. So, example, Srila Prabhupada was dictating, sorry, not transcribing, Srila Prabhupada was dictating when Gargamuni bought Srila Prabhupada a dictaphone, a German dictaphone. And he describes how he brought the dictaphone to Srila Prabhupada. And he started explaining about how to use the dictaphone, and Srila Prabhupada said it's okay, and Prabhupada told him to leave. Prabhupada was able to use a dictaphone without reading the manual. It's like he knew how to use this. So it's just like second nature for him. And when Gargamuni came in and he saw Prabhupada, using the buttons and knowing exactly what to press, how to press, he was surprised. Because without this is new technology. Right? It's like you get a new phone, you got so many buttons you need to actually learn. Otherwise it's Greek, what to do. So Prabhupada was expert like that. And Prabhupada started using the dictaphone and dictating, so many tapes, one after another. So the tapes were increasing and the devotees were trying to type as fast as they could. So one day, a young student knocked on the door and Brahmananda opened the door and saw this young student, and they said, yes. He says, well, I'm doing my project. I have a project to do in university that I need to go to a institute and help them, a non-profit institute. And Brahmananda said, oh, wonderful. What can you do? He says, I can do anything, but I can type. Oh, wonderful. All right, please come in. So here's a typist. Excellent. So they gave him all the tapes. And Brahman Prabhu explains that in no time, he practically typed transcribed or typed all of Prabhupada's lectures and completed all the typing required. And then he left, never to be seen again. So we can naturally try to understand, okay, who that person was. Krishna must have, no doubt, sent someone to assist Srila Prabhupada in his mission to relieve that anxiety. So like that, we know Prabhupada was sent so many devotees to help him in his anxiety to serve and fulfill the order of his Guru Maharaj. Prabhupada in one purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita describes a true devotee is one who relieves Lord Chaitanya of his anxiety. This is a true devotee. And what is the anxiety of Lord Chaitanya? To give pure love of Krishna in the form of fruits as a gardener to all the people of this world. So this is the anxiety. That means Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will never be satisfied and free from anxiety until everyone's got the fruit of love of God. So therefore, those who relieve Lord Chaitanya of the anxiety to distribute Krishna consciousness, they are serving the Lord wonderfully and nicely. So Prabhupada's point here, or in terms of infallible, or the verse, the point is that because the Pandavas were devotees, Krishna was present, therefore Krishna would help them and relieve their anxiety. And how did he do that? Prabhupada describes this, that King Maruta had left a lot of gold. So how is that? And Prabhupada describes, one of the great emperors of the world, he reigned over the world long before the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was the son of Maharaj Evikshit and was a great devotee of the sun god, known as Yamaraj. His brother, Samvarta, was a rival priest of the great Brihaspati, the learned priest of the demigods. He conducted one sacrifice called Shankara Yagya, by which the Lord was so satisfied that he was pleased to hand over to him the charge of a mountain peak of gold. This peak of gold is somewhere in the Himalayan mountains. Still there? Any adventurers? You can go on an adventure. And the modern adventurers, Prabhupada is even encouraging, and the modern adventurers may try to find it there. So remember, the Himalayan mountain range is not just one peak, it's a range, right? It's called the Himalayan mountain range. It's a range of mountains. And also at certain levels, it's very high. So, for human beings to go to that level, it's also very, very difficult. And there are certain areas which are also beyond the dimension of human beings. He was so powerful, an emperor, that at the day's end of sacrifice, the demigods from the other planets like Indra, Chandra, and Brihaspati used to visit his palace. So no doubt, a very, very exalted king that even the demigods would come and visit. During one Rath Yatra festival, one devotee told the reporter that actually, because she was surprised, so many people here. And he also told them, well, there are so many people here, but there's also people from other planets. And she was shocked with that statement. So during one report session, a conference with Srila Prabhupada, she asked Srila Prabhupada that yesterday in the festival, your disciple said that there are other people from other planets. Is that true? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. Why you can't see? And in fact, she had asked a question before, and the question she had asked before this specific question, at least one or two questions before. So she had asked Srila Prabhupada that, Swami, how is it that they picked you up in this fancy car? So Prabhupada picked up on that she was envious. And Prabhupada began to explain, yes, because you meant to treat the spiritual master as good as God, and picking me up in a fancy car is actually deficient. They meant to pick me up in a golden car. So Prabhupada responded to it. So when she asked this question, that I heard that there are people from other planets, Prabhupada said yes, and Prabhupada responded, why you can't see? And then he answered, because you're envious. Because Prabhupada could understand, you see, you're envious, why they driving me in a very fancy car? So Prabhupada said, because you're envious. So the demigods, they would visit. And we know the demigods visited Srila Prabhupada during Kirtans. Narad Muni would visit. So many personalities would visit, because Prabhupada was no ordinary person. We know Srila Prabhupada is Srila Prabhupada, but the demigods and the higher beings, they would know Srila Prabhupada on a different dimension, different level. And because he had the gold peak at his disposal, he had sufficient gold in his possession. The canopy of the sacrificial altar was completely made of gold. In his daily performance of the sacrificial ceremonies, some of the inhabitants of Vayuloka, the airy planets, were invited to expedite the cooking work of the ceremonies. Right? So you can see, this king was very extraordinary. He even had cooks come from Vayuloka. We would generally, if we need, cooks, we need to import some cooks from India. He was importing cooks from Vailoka at high level context. And the assembly of the demigods in the ceremony was led by Vishwadev. By his constant pious work, he was able to drive all kinds of diseases from the jurisdiction of his kingdom. All the inhabitants of the higher planets like Devaloka, Pitraloka were pleased with him for his great sacrificial ceremonies. Every day he used to give in charity to the learned Brahmanas such things as beddings, seats, conveyances, and sufficient quantities of gold. Because of the munificent charities and performance of innumerable sacrifices, the king of heaven, Indradev, was fully satisfied with him and always wished for his welfare. Due to his pious activities, he remained a young man throughout his life and reigned over the world for 1,000 years, surrounded by his satisfied subjects, ministers, legitimate wives, sons, and brothers. Even Lord Krishna praised his spirit of pious activities. He handed over his only daughter to Maharshi Angira, and by his good blessings, he was elevated to the King of Heaven. First of all, he wanted to offer the priesthood of his sacrifice to the learned Brihaspati, but the demigods refused to accept the post because of the king's being a human being, a man of this earth. He was very sorry for this, but on the advice of Narad Muni, he appointed Samvarta to the post, and he was successful in his mission. So then Prabhupada, so this is how this mountain of gold, this is how Yudhishthira Maharaj was able to perform the sacrifice, because it was still there. The success of a particular type of sacrifice completely depends on the priest in charge. In this age, all kinds of sacrifice are forbidden because there is no learned priest among the so-called Brahmanas who go by the false notion of becoming sons of the Brahmanas without Brahmanical qualifications. In this age of Kali, therefore, only one kind of sacrifice is recommended, Sankirtan Yajna, as inaugurated by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the only sacrifice that we should really adopt. Every other form of sacrifice, even though it may be there and it's described in the Vedas, but it is not the prescribed form of sacrifice. Firstly, because the Brahmanas are not qualified, and secondly, because it is not prescribed. Even if there's a qualified Brahmana, then still we should be faithful to the Yuga avatar. For in each Yuga, the Yuga avatar would present the sacrifice for that age that the citizens of that age should perform. So in this Kali Yuga, Srijat Mahaprabhu has come to give us the Sankirtan Yajna, and we should be faithful to that form of sacrifice. Tena sambrita sambaro dharma putro Yudhishthira vaji medes tribir puto yagne samayajad darim. By those riches, the king could procure the ingredients for 3 horse sacrifices. Thus, the pious king Yudhishthira, who was very fearful after the battle of Kurukshetra, pleased Lord Hari and the personality of Godhead. So after Krishna instructed them to go and get this mountain of gold, they used that, and they were able to, he was able to perform the horse sacrifice. And in this specific verse, and purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about the intention, why Yudhishthira Maharaj wanted to perform the sacrifices, and what was his reason, because he was afraid of the sins that were incurred on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, even though it was ordained by the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada makes some interesting points in the purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the ideal and celebrated pious king of the world. And still, he was greatly afraid after the execution of the battlefield of Kurukshetra because of the mass killing in the fight, all of which was done only to install him on the throne. So we can see it wasn't like, oh yeah, good, everybody got killed, thank God, and I'm now on I'm on the throne now. Nope, this was not his mentality. This was not his consciousness. He therefore took all the responsibility for the sins committed in the warfare. And to get rid of these sins, he wanted to perform 3 sacrifices in which horses are offered at the altar. The horses that were offered at the altar are not killed. So this is not a horse sacrifice in terms of slaughtering. This is a horse sacrifice that is called a horse sacrifice. And after the ceremony is performed, like in Ashwamedha sacrifice, different sacrifices, after sacrifice is performed by all the qualified brahmanas, then what happens is the final test. Because every sacrifice, at the end of the sacrifice, there is a concluding part of the ceremony where an old horse is pushed through the fire and comes out of the fire as a fawn, as a young horse. So an old horse becomes a young horse. It's not that the horse is sacrificed and killed. And this was the last part of a ceremony, of the sacrificial ceremony, to prove that the ceremony was successful. And because Yudhishthira was authentic and a pious king and a devotee, and the Brahmanas were pious, authentic, and devotees, and the Lord himself was present, then naturally the sacrifice was authentic and bona fide. And therefore the outcome and the result was also confirmed with the horse being sacrificed in this way. Such a sacrifice is very costly. Even Maharaj Yudhishthira had to collect the necessary heaps of gold left by Maharaj Maruta, and the Brahmanas were given gold in charity by the king Maruta. The learned Brahmanas could not take away all the loads of gold given by Maharaj Maruta, and therefore they left behind the major portions of the gifts. And Maharaj Maruta also did not again collect such heaps of gold given away in charity. Besides that, all the golden plates and utensils which were used in the sacrifice were also thrown in the dustbins. And all such heaps of gold remained unclaimed property for a long time, till Maharaj Yudhishthira collected them for his own purposes. Lord Krishna advised the brothers of Yudhishthira Maharaj to collect the unclaimed property because it belonged to the king. The more astonishing thing is that no subject of the state also collected such unclaimed gold for industrial enterprise or anything like that. This means that the state citizens were completely satisfied with all necessary life and necessities of life, and therefore not inclined to accept unnecessary productive enterprises for sense gratification. Maharaj Yudhishthira also relinquished the heaps of gold for performing sacrifice and for pleasing the Supreme Hari personality of Godhead. Otherwise, he had no desire to collect them for the state treasury. So this is real Krishna consciousness, that the king is not greedy. He's not interested in getting gold and accumulating wealth for his sense gratification, but really interested in getting wealth for pleasing the Supreme Lord and for the welfare of the citizens. The citizens are also not interested in unnecessarily complicating their life through factories, production, different types of productive factories, etc., to create enterprises for sense gratification. We find in today's world, people create enterprises for so many products, all connected to sense gratification. even though they may have the necessities of life, complicating life. So citizens were satisfied, they had all the necessities. And Prabhupada would often say, what do you need to survive? You need a roof over your head, you need some land, you need a cow to drink milk and make sweets from the milk products, you need land to grow grains and fruits, and that's it. Right? You need to make your clothes, so you would spin and make your own clothes from cotton, and you can now live happily and chant Hare Krishna. So life can be very simple, but when people are interested in sense gratification as their focus, then naturally they would be driven on this path. Yudhishthira Maharaj was focused, and here it is described that he did this also to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was personally present. Then Prabhupada continues, one should take lessons from the acts of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was afraid of sins committed on the battlefield, and therefore he wanted to satisfy the Supreme Authority. This indicates that unintentional sins are also committed in our daily occupational discharge of duties. And to counteract even such unintentional crimes, one must perform sacrifices as they are recommended in the revealed scriptures. What are the unintentional sins that we commit? Can anyone type in the chat? Robert's writing here, when we perform our daily occupational discharge of duties, there are unintentional sins that are committed. So what are some of the unintentional sins that are committed in the daily occupational discharge of the duties? Please type in the chat.
We harm the plants.
So Madhuri is saying we harm the plants. That's all. Next. Those online can answer right. Sharina says, when driving, so many small insects get killed. Correct. Yamavati Radhika says, killing microbes when we breathe. Correct. One more. Okay, so when we're cooking, yes, while cooking, we're killing, correct. So when you switch on the stove, you just killed so many microbes, so many bacteria, so many insects. When you're sweeping, when you're walking, when you're sleeping, when you're bathing, when you're brushing. So you're practically killing unintentionally, but we are killing at every moment. Each time you blink your eyes, you just squished microbes. Each time you rub your hair, you just destroyed so many bacteria and microbes that were on your hair. So we are killing. Now, someone may say, well, it's part of life, what to do? No, Prabhupada is telling us we should be concerned, we should be worried about this, and we should do something, okay? What should we do? Prabhupada says you have to counteract it. You have to counteract even such unintentional crimes. It's a crime. For you to kill, even unintentionally, is a crime. And criminals need to be punished. So in order to avoid being punished, one must perform sacrifices as they are recommended in the revealed scriptures. So Prabhupada continues. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Yagnartat karmano anyatra loka ayam karma bandhana, 3.9, that one must perform sacrifices recommended in the scriptures in order to get rid of commitments of all unauthorized work or even unintentional crimes which we are apt to commit. By doing so, one shall be freed from all kinds of sins. And those who do not do so, but work for self-interest or sense gratification, have to undergo all tribulations accrued from the committed By doing so, one shall be freed from all kinds of sins, and those who do not do so, but work for self-interest or sense gratification, have to undergo all tribulations accrued for committed sins. Therefore, the main purpose of performing sacrifices is to satisfy the Supreme Personality, Hari. The process of performing sacrifice may be different in terms of different times, places, and persons. But the aim of such sacrifice is one and the same at all times and in all circumstances. And namely, what is that? Satisfaction of the Supreme Lord Hari. Hari Toshanam. We heard in one of the first chapters that the goal of Varnashram system, the goal of all our duties, some Siddhi Hari Toshanam, is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the way of pious life, and that is the way of peace and prosperity in the world at large. Maharaj Yudhishthira did all these as an ideal king in the world. If Maharaj Yudhishthira is a sinner in his daily discharge of duties in royal administration of state affairs, where in killing of man and animal is recognized art, then we can just imagine the amount of sins committed continuously and unconsciously by untrained population of Kali Yuga, who have no way to perform sacrifice to please the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavatam says, therefore, that the prime duty of human being is to satisfy the Supreme Personality, Supreme Lord, by the performance of one's occupational duties. Let any man of any place or community, caste or creed be engaged in any sort of occupational duty, but he must agree to perform sacrifice as it is recommended in the scriptures for the particular time, place, and person. In the Vedic scriptures, it is recommended that in Kali Yuga, people engage in glorifying the Lord by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Kirtanad eva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Vrajet. Without offense. By doing so, one can be freed from all sins and thus can attain the highest perfection of life by returning home back to Godhead. We have already discussed this more than once in this great literature in different places, especially in the introductory portion, by sketching the life of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And still we are repeating the same with a view to bring about peace and prosperity in society. The Lord has declared openly in Bhagavad Gita how he become pleased with us, and the same process is practically demonstrated in the life and preaching work of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The perfect process of performing yagyas or sacrifice to please the Supreme Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead, who gets us free from all miseries of existence, to follow the ways of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this dark age of quarrel and dissension. Maharaj Yudhishthira had to collect heaps of gold to secure paraphernalia for horse sacrifice yagya in the days of sufficiency. So we can hardly think of such performance of yagya in these days of insufficiency and complete scarcity of gold. At the present moment, we have heaps of paper and promises of their being converted into gold by economic development of modern civilization, and still there is no possibility of spending riches like Maharaj Yudhishthira, either individually or collectively, or by state patronization. Such just suitable, therefore, for the age is the method recommended by Lord Sri Mahaprabhu in terms of the Shastra. Such a method requires no expenditure at all, and yet can award more benefit than other expensive methods of yagya performances. The horse sacrifice yagya or cow sacrifice yagya performed by the Vedic regulations shouldn't be misunderstood as a process of killing animals. On the contrary, animals offered for the yagya are rejuvenated to a new span of life by the transcendental power of chanting of the Vedic hymns, which is properly chanted, if properly chanted, are different from what is understood by common laymen. The Veda mantras are all practical, and the proof is rejuvenation of the animal, of the sacrificed animal. There is no possibility of such methodical chanting of the Vedic hymns by so-called brahmanas or priests of the present age. The untrained descendants of the twice-born family are no more like their forefathers, and thus they are counted among the Sudras or once-born man. The once-born man is unfit to chant the Vedic hymns, and therefore there is no practical utility of chanting the original hymns. And to save them all, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu propounded the Sankirtan movement or yajna for all practical purposes, and the people of the present age are strongly recommended to follow this sure and recognized path. So Prabhupada has spent a great deal in this purport to encourage everyone who are straightforward and simple to just accept the Sankirtan yajna process given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is even more powerful than all the sacrifices performed in the previous ages. Text 35. Ahuto Bhagavan Rajna Yajayit Va Vijayar Nripam Uvasa Katichin Ma San Suridam Priyakam Kam Yaya. Lord Shri Krishna, the personal of Godhead, been invited to the sacrifices by Maharaj Yudhishthira, saw to it that they were performed by qualified twice-born brahmanas. After that, for the pleasure of the relatives, the Lord remained a few months. So Lord Krishna was naturally personally invited, and the Lord also had some service. And as the Supreme Lord, he made sure that everything goes on nicely, perfectly arranged. Lord Shri Krishna was invited by Maharaj Yudhishthira to look into the supervision of the performance of yajna, and the Lord, to abide by the order of his elderly cousin, caused the performance of yajna by the learned twice-born brahmanas. Simply taking birth in a family of a brahmana does not make one qualified to perform yajnas. One must be twice born by proper training and initiation from the bona fide acharya. The once born scions of brahmana families are equal with the once born Sudras, and such Brahma Bandhus or unqualified once born scions must be rejected for any purpose of religious or Vedic function. Lord Shri Krishna was entrusted to look after this arrangement, and perfect as he is, he caused the yajnas to be performed by the bona fide twice-born brahmanas for successful execution. So in Vedic system, and here we see the Lord following that system, not anybody could just perform a sacrifice, right? There is qualification required because it is a system given by the Lord himself. So the qualified brahmanas would then perform the sacrifice, and you would get a qualified result. Unqualified brahmanas would basically mean a total waste of time. And we see today, even some of these ceremonies are still continued with priests, who would do the ceremony, and then after the ceremony is complete, they would go and smoke. So totally unqualified, right? Or they're doing the ceremony and they themselves don't know what they're doing. Or they're doing the ceremony and worried about the envelope that they're going to get. Completely unqualified. So Lord, as the perfect personality, supreme personality, made sure that everything was perfectly arranged. 36. Tato Rajna Bhyanu Jata Krishna Ya Saha Bandhu Dipandubi Yayo Dwaravatim Brahman Sarjuno Yadubir Vrata. O Shonaka, thereafter the Lord, having bid farewell to the king Yudhishthira, Draupadi, and other relatives, started for the city of Dwarka, accompanied by Arjuna and the members of the Yadu dynasty. And thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Birth of Emperor Parikshit. Kantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, King Parikshit ki jai, Nitai Go Pramanande, Hari Hari Bo. So we have concluded this chapter where the duties of an ideal king, the wonderful qualities of Maharaj Parikshit, his glorious activities are described, also how to raise children, the proper Vedic education that needs to be there to assist the society, and very, very wonderful points that Srila Prabhupada has highlighted in his Bhaktivedanta purports. Any questions or comments anyone has? Depending where you are in the world, tomorrow is the beginning of the auspicious month of Kartik. Very, very dear to Krishna. And this month is very dear to Krishna because the presiding deity of this month is Srimati Radhavani. And we know that the Lord is extremely inclined and attached. In his heart resides Srimati Radhavani. And because this is the month of Srimati Radhavani, then anything that is connected to Radhavani becomes dear to Krishna. Therefore, if we take advantage of this month of Kartik, we will make great advancement. Because Krishna is very happy with this month, it's connected to Radhavani, then he is also very accessible, and he increases the benefit that we receive by any devotional activity. It's like when you go for a sale, you buy one, get one free. So when you engage in the same devotional activity in this month of Kartik, you're really going to get many, many, many fold benefit. So for devotees, it's a wonderful month to sing the song Damadarsikam and pray to baby Krishna in the form of Damodar. Shamananda Prabhu says, okay, so Mother Hemavati Radhika says, thank you, Prabhu, for the wonderful class. We are grateful. You mentioned that we should always remember Krishna is with us and we are not alone. So what are some practical ways to remember this? Firstly, we know that within our heart is the super soul, and the super soul is Krishna. So Krishna is there. The super soul is also in every atom and in between every atom. So the super soul is everywhere, which means Krishna is everywhere. So that way, understanding the way creation is created, theoretically, we can accept that the Lord is everywhere. So how do we practically realize that Krishna is everywhere? It can only be practically realized if we practically become Krishna conscious. So this is the whole understanding of Krishna consciousness. You are becoming more and more conscious that Krishna is everywhere. Also, the more you begin to love Krishna, then your consciousness starts to become influenced due to that love. It's like, you say people are blind with love. And when people fall in love, they become oblivious of their surroundings, and all they see is their beloved. All they want to think about is beloved. Right? So they really become a little crazy. So as devotees, when we become truly Krishna conscious and become conscious of Krishna, then we begin to see Krishna in everything and everywhere. Prabhupada, by his own example, and we can, from my limited perspective, I would say the best way to practically realize Krishna is everywhere is to see things through the perspective of how Srila Prabhupada saw. So for example, we see a mosquito, and We see a mosquito, we just see some aggressor that's going to drink our blood. But we see Prabhupada, and if we remember some pastimes related to mosquitoes in relation to Prabhupada, now we saw a mosquito thinking of Prabhupada, and we link the mosquito to Prabhupada. Prabhupada means Krishna conscious. We just linked ourselves to Krishna. So now we see mosquito related to Krishna. Now we go into a pastime. Let's say Prabhupada, for example, saw the mosquito land on his hand. And then Prabhupada told the devotees, just see, Krishna has given him a syringe. How wonderful. So mosquito, Prabhupada pastime, Krishna giving mosquito a syringe. So now when you see a mosquito, you see Krishna's compassion, Krishna's kindness, Krishna facilitating. So you just see Krishna in a mosquito. So that's like a practical example. So my advice is try to see as many things as possible in this world through the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. And if there's any devotees online that would also like to share and have an answer, you're most welcome to just raise your hand or tell us that you like to speak or type. Because I'm sure many devotees also have such or have realizations to answer. Right, Shamananda process, Hare Krishna, but we see that whatever we're hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, like raising of children in a spiritual environment and the way the saintly kings take care of citizens, no one encroaches upon others belonging, etc., is opposite of where we are now. Can society individuals go back to this type of situation model, or is it a tough and impossible task? No, it's not a tough and impossible task. That is why Srila Prabhupada came. Believe it or not. Prabhupada came, Prabhupada was sent by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to change the tide of Kali Yuga for the next 10,000 years. Prabhupada came and, building on the foundation of the previous acharyas, has now put in the foundation to do that. So Prabhupada's already built the foundation. When you build a foundation, you don't see the house. But the foundation is key for the house. So Prabhupada has built the foundation for exactly that. Unfortunately, like I could say for myself, I will not be able to see it in my lifetime that this will happen, because it is not a one lifetime transformation or goal or activity. It is over multiple lifetimes, generations. Okay, but no doubt you will start seeing generation after generation this transformation happening, both from a Krishna conscious perspective, from a planetary perspective, from a global economic perspective. On all levels, this transformation will start happening. There's many pieces to it, but it definitely will happen. There are many parts of this goal of the golden age, because what we just, in fact, what we're reading in terms of Yudhishthira Maharaj Parikshit is the golden age. And then Kali came in and diverted everything. So the first 10,000 years of Kali Yuga is going to be the golden age. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to inaugurate that. Prabhupada came to lay the foundation so that we could build over it. And over generations, it's going to transform this planet into the golden age. and they're already on different levels and dimensions. There are already things in place to put that in motion, in action. Certain events we will see within our own lifetime, and many of the events we will not see within our life. Rest assured, it's going to happen. We don't need to worry about it because we really cannot worry about the future. But what we can do right now is take advantage of what Srila Prabhupada has given us for our own Krishna consciousness. And let us individually not waste that opportunity. Those fortunate souls that are going to be here next 5, 6, 7,000 years are going to be very fortunate. Maybe 2, 3, even 1,000 years are going to be very fortunate. Why? Because Krishna consciousness is going to be the norm in majority of the cases. And people will be brought up naturally in an environment that's Krishna conscious. We may not have been that fortunate, but we are fortunate because we have been connected to Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, let us individually take full advantage and perfect our life. And if the Lord wants us to come back and render some service to help Srila Prabhupada in unfolding the golden age, then so be it. So it is most certainly possible, and it most certainly will happen. Mother Archana Siddhi says, thank you very much for the beautiful class, as usual. Thank you very much, Mother Archana Siddhi, for your comment, feedback. Mother Lash, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thanks for your Krishna Katha. Beautiful class as always. Is it true that we all have conversations with Shri Krishna while in the womb, and we make promises to the Lord about what we want to achieve spiritually after their birth and in the life? So the Bhagavatam will describe this in the 3rd canto. We will read. For the pious souls that come in this world, they in the womb they pray to Krishna, my Lord, this is very uncomfortable. Please take me out. I'm getting bitten by worms. My brother worms are here, and and the spices that my mother is eating is burning my skin. Please, please, I promise you, you take me out and I'll worship you, my Lord, please. So yes, all the pious souls have made a promise like that to the Lord. And then as soon as they're pushed out, that pressure of being pushed out, that experience, and then coming in contact with material energy full force, they forget. And they start to think, how can I enjoy this world? Krishna, who Krishna? What Krishna? I don't know about Krishna. I'm only interested in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Let me enjoy. So the child gets this consciousness and comes out and forgets Krishna. If he's fortunate to have Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's followers to remind him, then he's most fortunate. So yes, in that sense, we have a conversation with Krishna. Okay, and depending on the level of Krishna consciousness of the soul from his pious life, it may just be a general prayer. That God, it's very uncomfortable, take me out. I promise you I'll worship you. Jagannath Priya Prabhu, Hare Krishna, welcome back. Thank you for today's most transcendental class, relishing all the nectar, wonderful, thank you. Hemavati Radhika says, thank you for the answer, Prabhu. This will definitely do. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, we wish you all a wonderful Kartik. Try to do something for the pleasure of Radha and Krishna, and take advantage of the discount, devotional discount that is given by the Lord, so that we can progress and be able to serve Srila Prabhupada in his mission. Kwantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Go Pramanande, Hari Hari Bo.